And welcome back. This is part two of the Tom Sumner Program and my weekly chat with Flint's premier political pundit, Paul Rosicki.
Always good to be here.
We've got some old news and some new news coming up this hour. Last hour, of course, we spent talking about this being the campaign political ad season.
You know, before we leave the campaign, as speaking of old news, we should remind people that for all the complaints you hear about negative advertising today, it's nothing new. You go back and take a look at the thing they said about Lincoln or Andrew Jackson or Jefferson or a lot of other folks. They went far beyond the worst negative stuff you see.
Remember the Andrew Jackson story?
Oh yeah,
the guy who talked bad about his wife.
Oh yeah,
and didn't he end up shooting him?
Yeah. They were in a duel, and I think he shot him. Yeah, and
that's taken a little bit far. But you know
talk
what?
About a negative ad.
If they did that today on television, I'd watch.
Oh, it would be the best viewer, the highest viewer numbers you could generate with that kind of stuff.
But here's a story that has been literally haunting people for 126 years. The picture we showed when we first came back for the second half is, I guess it doesn't look like a photo, but it's been copied so many times. It could be a photo, it could be an artist's rendering of one of the suspects, a longtime suspect in the Jack the Ripper case from the late 1800s. And there have been movies and investigations and speculations.
Books and all kind of things about who was Jack the Ripper. Yeah.
And it's, and every few years somebody comes out with a story that says they figured out who did it. And sometimes, some of my favorite movies are movies that speculate about, a particular suspect. One that I'm still trying to remember the title for a movie with Donald Sutherland and Genevieve Bujold and Christopher Plummer as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
It's a Sherlock Holmes story.
Yeah.
And Sherlock Holmes is on the trail of Jack the Ripper. I think James Mason played Dr. Watson in that, but they made it out to be that Jack the Ripper was a very sick offspring of the royal family.
Yeah, that's the one I can recall hearing. And in fact, they attached a name to it. I've forgotten who it was, but some relative of Queen Victoria, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that the upper echelons of power and a group of Masons were covering this all up. And there have been all kinds of conspiracy theories, but just recently, let's see, who is the guy? I don't even know if I'm going to be able to pronounce his name. Dr. Jari Luhalainen. It's Finnish, Swedish, he's a Finnish expert in historic DNA. And there was, let's see, the second to the last confirmed victim of the Ripper, Catherine Eddowes was her name. And she was found in Mitre Square on September 30th. This would have been like 1883, something, somewhere in there. And there was a shawl found there. And this shawl was sold recently at auction. And this guy, this Finnish expert in historic DNA, examined it and has compared the DNA to descendants of Catherine Eddowes, but also to this one suspect, Aaron Kosminski. That was the image we showed. And let's see, what were the results? Let's see, I have it in here somewhere. There were 2 tests run. The first strand of DNA showed a 99.2% match, and A second strand was tested and achieved a perfect 100% match. So they're saying that definitively this is the guy.
At least he had some contact with that shawl. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, it was
Now-
just 5 years ago that a historian claimed to have discovered the real identity of Jack the Ripper and believes the killer was a morgue attendant named Robert Mann, which he wrote a book about, and it also was a Discovery Channel documentary. But you see these things pop up all the
Every
time.
couple of years there's a new theory. Yeah. Yeah.
But with this new technology, and I guess that becomes the question, with the new technology, can we now know for sure? Can we go back
Yeah,
and
now-
solve things? What happens if we start digging into the Kennedy assassination?
We're going to
or,
find something new.
You know,
Of course, the real issue, I guess, I don't know exactly what they found here for sure, but finding the DNA simply means that he had some contact with that shawl. Whether that means he was the murderer, or maybe he was an accomplice, maybe he somehow passed it along to somebody else. Who knows? But he had contact with the shawl, so they could find the DNA. But I'm thinking of, in almost an illegal sense here, if you had to prove a case in court, where do you prove that he actually did the killing? You know, and maybe his blood is there. Now that suggests an awful lot, but even that is not concrete proof, I guess. I don't know, depending what they find. I'm not
well,
sure what
what's
they
fun
found.
about this,
What'd they
there's
find?
a comment here that Kosminski was actually a suspect
Oh,
at the
okay.
time of the
All right.
murders. And he was even named by Chief Inspector Donald Swanson in notes the policeman made. But as the myth and legend of the murders grew over the more than 125 years, so did the list of more fanciful suspects.
It would almost be a shame to find out the real killer because it's more fun to speculate. It's like kind of like Jimmy Hoffa. If we ever find him, it'll just take all the fun out of it. Every spring we have a hunt for Jimmy Hoffa around here.
Well, yes, that we dig up a barn.
Oh yeah,
in
if you're a farmer, once
Clarkston or
your
someplace,
South 40 dug
Milford.
up, just say Jimmy Hoffa's out there. Yeah.
Now, here's the doctor himself
Okay.
that made the discovery. He says, it has taken a great deal of hard work using cutting-edge scientific techniques, which would not have been possible 5 years ago.
Oh.
Once I had the profile, I could compare it to that of the female descendant of Kosminski's
Oh, okay.
sister,
Okay.
who had given us a sample of her DNA swabbed from inside her mouth.
All right. Yeah.
And then, let's see. Now, this was Aaron Kosminski was born in the Polish town of Kladowa, or Kladowa, I don't know how to say it, then part of the Russian Empire. Oh, he was born in 1865. He immigrated to England with his family in 1881, moving to Whitechapel. He set himself up as a hairdresser, but it is clear that he was suffering psychological problems, with latter-day case notes saying he had been ill from 1885. These things are fascinating. Why is it that we find a story like this so compelling?
I think mainly because there is no answer. As I say, I mean, if we were to finally prove the answer, it would almost ruin the fun of trying to untangle the mystery. And I think there's somewhat the same thing is true for the Kennedy assassination, for Jimmy Hoffa, for lots of other mysteries of one kind where, yeah, we sort of have an answer, but there's unanswered questions. I think we all like to untangle a mystery in some ways. And maybe in some ways, the older it is, the less emotional impact it has on us, unlike a contemporary murder of some kind. It becomes more historical and more of a, more almost like a game, trying to untangle a mystery or solve the puzzle.
Now, this is interesting. Because of his mental issues, he was forcibly put in Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum, and he remained in asylums until his death in 1919 at age 53. The 5 relatively undisputed murders of Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly happened between August 31st and November 9th, 1888, the 126th anniversary of Chapman's murder was yesterday. Monday, September 8th. The police file on the murders also point to the mutilation deaths of Rose Milet, Alice McKenzie, the Pinchin Street torso, which was never identified, and Francis Coles, Coles being the last to die in February 1891. In February 1891, Kosminski was forcibly put into that asylum where he spent the rest of his life. While it can be argued that it is hardly conclusive evidence that Kosminski was the Ripper, the DNA of a Whitechapel resident on the belongings of a known Whitechapel prostitute merely proves Kosminski met Eddowes at some point. It does put Kosminski closer to a Ripper victim than any other suspect in the century-old case. Let's see. Putting a typically Hollywood spin on the mystery, take another look at the positioning of the confirmed victims. Somebody took an aerial photo of where all the murders took place and connected the dots, and it's a giant K for Kosminski. Now, now that hardly convinced me.
That's true. That's maybe a Hollywood spin on that, but maybe part of an X-Files touch there. But it's suggestive, yeah.
But you know, you think of, just a few years ago, the FBI had a profiler who went through and did a whole profile of Jack the Ripper, but they couldn't attach it to a person. This guy is saying DNA.
At least you got a connection there.
This is the guy.
Yeah.
Or at least there's physical evidence now that connects this guy to one of the
more
victims.
than anybody else, apparently. Yeah, and I think that it comes back to the fact that we do enjoy solving a puzzle or untangling a mystery. I mean, why do murder mysteries do so well on the movies or on television? Because, well, who done it? That's the old question.
But this has been one of the favorite stories, for the last, well, obviously more than 125 years or 126 years as of yesterday. And some of my favorite treatments and takeoffs have been Jack the Ripper stories. There's one there's one where they took London Bridge apart piece by piece. Moved it to a town in the Southwest.
That's right, in Arizona someplace, I believe. Yeah.
Well, soon after that, a movie came out that somehow the bridge itself had the spirit of a killer very much like Jack the Ripper, which came to life now in the United States.
Was somebody killed in Arizona around the bridge or on the bridge or something?
Well, in this movie,
I see.
I
Okay.
mean, it was
I see.
was a horror movie, but it used the moving of the bridge as a kickoff, to make it seem real that somehow we had brought the ghost over here. The original Star Trek television series had an episode with a serial killer that turned out to be a spirit that had inhabited people's bodies throughout history, going all the way back to Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
was one of the names that this entity was known by. But a lot of these, fanciful treatments, can they survive in the wake of DNA evidence?
as I say, I almost hope we don't prove it once and for all, because it'll ruin the story. As I say, it's almost more fun to keep digging these mysteries up. Whether it's the Kennedy thing or
I remembered the movie Murder by Decree.
Oh, I
It's
recall
one of my favorite.
I recall the title now.
Sherlock
I never saw it, but I
Holmes.
recall the title. Yeah.
I read all the Sherlock Holmes books and hungry for more Sherlock Holmes stories. I was glad that Nicholas Myers was able to jump up and fulfill that by writing a couple of things, including a book called I don't know. It was Sherlock Holmes in Dallas.
Oh,
And it brought Sherlock Holmes into more contemporary times. It's a paperback. It's in the old days they'd have called it a dime novel.
I recall those.
and it essentially puts Sherlock Holmes on the case of who killed John Kennedy.
Oh, yeah.
Who assassinated the president. interesting
Makes for a
stuff.
good story. And like I said, it may really solve it in some ways. It's certainly some of the time frames line up reasonably well. It makes a certain sense of logic there.
Now, on to some of the newer things, and this is appropriate since it's 420. Governor Rick Snyder and Attorney General Bill Schuette have sent Saginaw a warning about a vote to decriminalize marijuana in the city. Both officials have indicated their disapproval and pointedly explained the ballot language that Saginaw is considering is not accurate because it fails to inform voters that even if passed, a city ordinance in any way legalizing marijuana will not supersede state laws.
Yeah.
So here's the bottom line. Regardless of what voters do in Saginaw, state law will prevail. Also, on a side note or sidebar, voters in Genesee County's smallest city,
Right.
Montrose,
Yeah, they've got it coming up apparently.
could decriminalize possession of less than an ounce of marijuana, but they will have to wait until next year
Yeah.
for their chance to do it because of some filing deadline issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that story. And
Isn't it presumptuous and is it smart politics to take a stand like this
you mean for Snyder?
for Snyder? Schuette too, for that.
Yeah, and Schuette as well, because he's off. It's probably not.
I mean,
a
to
big deal.
blatantly tell people it doesn't matter what you vote, we're
Yeah.
going to do what we want.
I mean, they are right, but you're right. I'm not so sure it's. Although, well, let me back up on that. No, I'm thinking here it might well be for some of the folks who are likely to vote for either Snyder or Schuette. It may be something that'll sell reasonably well. They don't want to sign up too much with the pro-marijuana crowd and so forth. I don't see it as being a big issue, because I mean, a number of cities have
This
done that.
election is all about getting out the vote.
Yeah. And
And
the last thing they need is all those folks who are on the pro-marijuana side of the issue turning out to vote. Maybe that's part of it there.
you know,
That
this
could
is
discourage that.
this is a fight to get out the vote.
Yeah.
Is this something that's going to make Republicans or even Tea Partiers, you know, is this going to rally the troops? Is this going to get those people out to vote for them?
You know, we had a vote like that in Flint a while back, and I don't recall the exact turnout for that election, but I don't recall that it was an enormous turnout. I don't think, I mean, I suspect an awful lot of folks have the feeling, well, yeah, you pass these local laws, but even the whole, you know, they don't change an awful lot in practice. Frankly, as for somebody who's in the, if somebody were in the medical marijuana business today, I don't know where your business stands. I'm amazed at how many places are out there, but exactly what's legal, what's not legal, it's got to be very confusing for someone who's trying to do it legally with all of these medical marijuana shops around town here in Flint.
Well, and
it's very unclear of the law.
But this has been kind of an interesting thing for me, not as somebody who necessarily uses marijuana medically or otherwise, but Michigan voters passed this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I've seen nothing, well, I can't say that. That would have been a misstatement. I have seen a great many elected officials trying very hard to circumvent that.
Absolutely, yeah, they really
And
have.
it seems, and this is more of the same. I mean, this is not new. It's not
Yeah.
a new position for Schuette. It's maybe a stronger position from Snyder than I would have expected. But it seems like a bad time.
It may be clumsy.
I mean, they don't have a choice because they got to take a stand on the law one
If
way
they
or
have
the
to,
other.
yeah, but they could remain silent on the issue, because it's, like I say, a number of cities have done that already with minimal consequences. But I mean, I think on the larger issue of marijuana in general, I'm coming to the conclusion gradually the state's either got to make a choice, either you make it legal or make it illegal. I'm struck by the fact that when you've got all this medical stuff, within, I'm going to guess, within a quarter mile of my house, I bet there's at least a half a dozen medical marijuana outlets. Now, is there that much demand for medical marijuana? I mean, I think we've all got a week in and out about what this stuff's all about. It's kind of semi-legal, but not quite legal.
Not very surprisingly, Paul lives sort of near the college.
That's right. And yeah, there's two on Dordt Highway. There's one over on Court Street. There's one, I think, on Davison Road, I believe.
Yeah.
Within a quarter mile, maybe a half mile of my house. And I mean, there's not for other medical facilities, there's not a outlets for aspirin or other kind of medical, other pills of one kind or another.
Well, there's a Rite Aid on every
There's a
corner.
Rite Aid, I guess there's that. So maybe the medical marijuana folks are kind of piggybacking on the Rite Aid stuff, I guess. But I'm just saying, in terms of the meaning of the law, maybe we ought to either be in favor of it or be against it, but this kind of half-life is just a very clumsy way to run things, and maybe kind of a dishonest way of running things. You know, if we're going to make it legal, let's make it legal. If it's going to be illegal, make it illegal. But to kind of do this wink and nod stuff, well, it's only for medical purposes, but every third kid in town's got a medical marijuana card, is probably the worst way of doing it.
Well, but for most people, it has been. I think most people understand that it's a step in a
Sure,
process.
I think so.
You know, if they can get them to move on medical marijuana, then eventually
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
recreational. We've
Colorado-
seen that in Colorado
Right.
and where, Oregon or
I think
Washington?
Oregon was the other. I think Oregon was the other one that's going to legalize it. Yeah.
California can't be far
No,
behind.
no.
Um,
And I think in practice, it's all but legal. I mean, I don't know what the police are doing with regard to arrests when they pick somebody up these days, but I mean, there's so many loopholes in that law. As I say, if you're somebody who's trying to run a quote marijuana grow shop and do it legally, do it honestly, I don't know how you follow the law, because it's pretty unclear exactly what some of those lines are, and how they're enforced, because some cops in some areas really enforce them. There's some little small village here that broke some marijuana growing shop. Was it Lum or Gaines? Some little village where
I'm not sure.
somebody opened a shop and the local cop shut them down pretty quickly. But in other areas, they operate relatively openly. But as I say, if I were in that business, I'd be kind of nervous about exactly what the changing laws are.
Flint passed a version of decriminalizing marijuana, and it was shot down by the city.
That's right.
You know, as you know, we still have state and federal laws, and those will be enforced. A lot of times, you know, I think a lot of the marijuana charges are used to build up cases against people that they're really looking for
You
other
overcharge, so
things.
you can charge a guy with 10 grand.
Like a lot of gun charges.
Oh yeah.
You know, they'll bust somebody for burglary, but they'll end up, well, you know, a real good example is this one, the guy, the grandfather of the little boy that the video of the puppy, he was throwing the puppy out in the street.
Yes, absolutely.
They went over and questioned the grandfather and ended up arresting him on gun charges.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't hear that part about the story. Okay.
Yeah, on gun charges.
Oh yeah, no, I saw the video.
He's on parole.
Oh, okay. No, I
And he had
didn't
some
hear the
guns.
second part of the
So,
story there.
You know, so they've taken the guy into custody, but a lot of times they'll use those gun charges, marijuana charges. You know, when they're investigating something else, if they can grab that, it's kind of the old tax strategy on
Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
It's the Al Capone maneuver.
That's true.
But they use those laws to build up charges, you know, to build a bigger case. Right. And, you know, so they're reluctant to let those go. But, you know, the trend certainly seems that most people really don't care anymore.
I think that's true. I mean, I think, and that cuts really across both parties. I mean, I think
it isn't.
Democrats
Yeah, this isn't a party thing at
No,
all.
I don't think so. I think even Republicans, maybe there are the cultural conservatives who would like to keep it illegal, but I think the libertarian wing of the Republican Party.
And so I just wonder if it's
Yeah.
good politics for either of them,
They
either
got-
Bill Schuette or Rick Snyder, to tell people almost blatantly, we don't care what you think, you're going to do what we say.
I think you're right. I think it's not going to do them any good. I don't know it'll do a huge amount of damage or harm for them from their point of view, but yeah, I don't see it doing them any good politically in that sense. And as I say, a lot of those votes really are kind of a moot point because state law does kind of override it.
And you know, it's go ahead. What were you going to say?
The real key is not so much the law, but how it's enforced. I mean, the local prosecutor, local cop on the corner can decide how they enforce the law, whether they kind of ignore it.
We've got
or play
laws
hardball.
on the books that have been dropped
absolutely.
from everyday practice without being eliminated.
Exactly. Yeah.
But here's one. You know, we're really talking about government overreach here.
Yeah.
which is not a very popular thing
That's-
these days.
that's
and,
true.
and one of the reasons why I bring it up, here's an example of government underreach. Voters in the village of Gaines will have to write in their choices for
Oh.
council seats after local officials missed the filing deadline to put names on the ballot.
Yeah.
4 seats on the 7-member board are on the ballot, including 3 council chairs and the president's position. With the missed deadline, the candidates will file as write-in candidates for the village of less than 400, where the top council candidate in the 2012 election received 92 votes.
Those write-ins can mean an awful. Now, there's a case where one vote can make a big difference.
How do you? I mean, they passed it off in the article. I read the.
I saw the
it was a
article,
piece in
too.
M Live
Yeah.
over the weekend, I guess. How do you? I mean, I know how they blew it off in the article, but how do you miss a deadline?
If
I mean,
you're
they
in
said the state didn't notify them, or they didn't get the notice, or something
seems
of
to me
when the
if-
deadline was, but you're already elected
Yeah,
people.
if you're an elected official, you know, gee, I'm up in November, and when do I file? I mean, sooner or later you're going to check this stuff out, and I would think if you've been through this process before, you at least ask somebody. You don't wait for the city clerk to call you and tell you to file your
I mean, this is
paperwork.
like McCotter and
Exactly, yeah.
Conyers. You know, how
Just
do you
the most-
spend multiple terms in Congress and
And-
then blow the filing deadline?
the
how do
most-
you function as, you know, an elected official and not pay attention when it's time to, you know, renew your
Yeah,
spot?
when you realize you're up for election and somebody's talking about it, I assume, and nobody bothers. And there were other offices that had to be filed by was it the July 22nd or
Yeah.
25th? Yeah.
July
Yeah,
22nd.
I think the education boards had to be filed by that time, and anybody up in November had to be. So the word was out.
Well, and which town? There's a small town. God, I want to say Linden, that didn't get enough candidates to
That's
fill
right.
the open
I
seats.
believe it is Linden. Yeah, yeah. And I think there may be a school board. I'm tempted to say
No, it was school board.
School board,
in
okay,
Linden.
maybe that was it. I was gonna say maybe Lakeville or two. There was a school board or two here who had the same situation where either nobody filed or simply nobody wanted to run.
Now, it's one thing when people don't want to run,
Yeah,
but then when you have people who want to
you want to
run,
be on there and just at least go through the most minor paperwork to fill out a form and say you want to be on the ballot.
it's not like they didn't do it once.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. Yeah, there are candidates who've never run before who forget that. But if you're already on the board or on the commission, you ought to know this kind of stuff. It's amazing. It really is.
Now, a couple of other things just off the top of my head. They announced, they being the water department for the city of Flint, that they've extended
Yes.
and expanded
Right.
the Boyle area on the
Covers
west
what,
side of Flint.
Maybe a third or not quite half the city of Flint, but a good significant chunk of the city of Flint is now under that Boyle order.
And in the wake of that news, Detroit announcing today the formation of a water authority.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean exactly? I mean, Detroit is going to still own the water and be responsible for, you know, managing it, but there's going to be an authority that oversees it. With it's been signed on by Wayne County exec and
Ficano.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also L. Brooks Patterson from Oakland. One or two others in the district that is being formed. But what does that say for the future of Detroit and Detroit politics? Are we going to see, here in Flint, we've got the KWA.
That's at least
and that's
they've broken ground on that, and that project is moving ahead apparently.
and we're going to see regionalization of water. We're hearing lots of talks about regionalizing other kinds of service.
I think so.
Do you see Detroit headed down that same road?
Oh, I think so. I think so. No, I think. I mean,
I
we've
mean, are
talked
we
about
going to
this.
see it with law enforcement and trash pickup
I think we've talked about this before, and more, I'm becoming convinced that we're going to see some of these older industrial towns, Detroit, Flint, Pontiac, maybe even Saginaw, maybe a few others. They'll stay in the map. They'll exist as the city of Flint and all the rest. But I can see a lot of their functions and a lot of their tax base being farmed out to a wider area, maybe a county-wide base, maybe even larger than that for some activities. Um,
well, we have
and
what, 84 counties in Michigan?
83.
83 counties in
yeah.
Michigan. And how many municipalities?
We've got
Townships, villages, isn't
about
it 400?
260 or so cities, about 260 or 70 villages, about 1,200 townships. So if you just take those,
So we're looking,
and
in 83 counties, we've got over 2,000, or near 2,000 municipalities, villages, townships.
yeah,
Um,
if you throw in school districts in Michigan and a few special districts, mosquito abatement stuff, we've got more than 3,000 local governments in Michigan.
Do you have any feel for what the people who support regionalization envision?
No.
Do they see 83 districts? Do they see
Well,
7 regions?
no,
Do
it's a
they
good
see
question.
9, 12?
For some of those, yeah, I could. For generally, no, I don't really. But I do know there was one plan. Gee, I'm going to say it goes back a good decade or 15 years. I think during the Engler years, I think, which was going to take Michigan and break it into something like 16 or so school districts. In other words, rather than having 500 little school districts all over the place, it was going to have, again, I may be off by a few numbers here, but somewhere around a dozen or 16 school districts that would cover the whole state. And everything else, you'd still keep all your local buildings and things, but they'd be run by these region-wide school districts and so on. And it never went anywhere. There was a little talk about it, but that's the only really concrete plan that I've ever seen on paper. And that goes back at least a decade, maybe 15 years, when that thing was kicking around.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it looks as though there's a big push for privatizing schools.
Yeah.
But the privatizing schools doesn't seem to be working very
No,
well.
they certainly have had the charters especially, and the other private schools that have developed have really had a rough time. That Detroit Free Press article of a couple of months ago really kind of raked them over the coals and suggested that, again, particularly the charters, the record was, to be generous, was mixed. A lot of failures. There were some successes, but an awful lot of failures, and particularly an awful lot of lack of oversight, where people were hiring relatives and friends, and good buddy contracts were being built into those systems. So I saw the charter movement tried to respond by creating some kind of a review board on their own. Where that's going to go, I don't know. But yeah, the bloom may be off the charters. And again, the take was that when those things were first introduced, again, a good decade or more, 15 years ago, they were going to be the silver bullet to fix all the problems of the public schools. It's at best, it's debatable. And again, an awful lot of those are doing no better and often a lot worse than the traditional public schools, as bad as some of those are doing. It's a pretty mixed record.
Are schools as bad off as they're reputed to be?
That's a good question.
There's an argument going on about that, and I saw a thing late last night on television with, and I'm sorry I can't remember the official's name, somebody who was talking about public education and the status of it, and I was reminded of something we came across about a year ago with these polls that show Congress being less popular
Right.
than cockroaches and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
But-
But if you singled out your particular representative, people by and large, at least in polling, were pretty happy with
And
who
in terms
was
of voting,
representing
I
them.
mean, again, this year, 95% of incumbents will get reelected, more than likely.
And so there's this thing where American public schools have been getting really beat up image-wise
Yeah.
for a good 20 or 30 years, but aren't in fact graduation rates higher and competency testing higher than ever before? I mean, aren't they actually performing?
I think they've crept up a
better
bit, yeah.
than the image they have?
And now some schools have got horrible records. In fact, I just heard kind of a sidebar here, just before I came here today, that the Flint schools did some kind of a count in the first week or two of their semester, and they lost 1,500 students this semester compared to last year. If that's true, that's a huge loss. So some are certainly hurting. But you know what? You make a good point, because the friends of a couple of kids of ours have graduated from some schools around here, and we'd go over there a lot and have dinner and talk to the kids. And when they were in high school, I was really extremely impressed by the stuff they were doing. I mean, the things they were reading, the kind of math they were doing, everything else, at least from my memory, strikes me as a lot more advanced than the stuff I was doing in high school. So I was certainly impressed by the kind of things they were doing. So yeah, you're right. For all the flack you hear, I'm at least sporadically hearing about some pretty good things happening out there. But again, some of the urban schools are in serious trouble, and the real problem is so many folks are abandoning them in huge numbers. It looks like it's happening in big numbers for the city of Flint.
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting and something to watch, because I don't think I don't think going to public or going to private schools is really the answer when people are calling to reform education.
I don't think so. And the problem is it's the for-profit companies came in and they skimmed off the students who were easy to educate, the ones who already didn't have any problems. They were fairly inexpensive. They produced a profit for the company and all the rest. And then they left the public schools with the kids who were the problems, the kids who were handicapped, who had other issues of one kind or another. And so in one sense, it made the public schools worse. And as I say, it's pretty hard to say that the profit motive is really going to generate education in quite the same way. So, yeah, I'm skeptical of that. It may here and there. In fact, it's happening even, we were hearing more and more about some of these private colleges that are taking advantage of students, running up huge debts, and giving them a certificate of something or another that may or may not lead to much of a job. And there's more pressure from the government coming on those folks because they may very often not deliver the goods they promise. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of delivering on goods, one day after President Barack Obama announced that he is delaying executive action on immigration, top lawmakers urged the president to ditch his plans for an executive action altogether and to work with Congress. Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, for example, indicated she'd prefer the president not act unilaterally at all. She said, the way this should be done is legislatively. She said this over the weekend on CNN's State of the Union. She said anything done through presidential action would be challenged in the courts. And Representative Mike Rogers, Republican from Michigan, also on the show, agreed.
Well,
which
it's
is
rare for those two to agree.
I was going to say,
yeah.
that's, you talk about strange bedfellows. He added that the president is being prudent by not acting. He said, I think that was wise. But he needs to work with Congress on this, he said. What do you think? Do you think he was jumping the gun? Do you think...
Well, no, I think he was responding to the pressure in his own party. I think what happened was several senators who are facing the Democratic senators facing tough re-election campaigns, basically came to him and said, we can't carry our states if you go ahead and do this. So I think it was an attempt, maybe a long shot, but an attempt to keep control of the Senate. Democrats are really on the line this year. If they lose 6 seats, they lose control of the Senate. So, and if you look at the numbers, there's probably at least 6 seats that are in serious play where they could lose those. So I think it's an attempt by Obama and the Democrats to keep control of the Senate by putting this off till at least after the election. On the other hand, though, he's sure catching a lot of flack from Hispanic groups, because after all he had said earlier about how he's going to take action, going to put some kind of act into place, whether Congress acted or not, a number of Hispanics... Well, he
had such tough talk in the State of the Union.
That's right. That's right.
And now, as it's approaching Well, and I think people, pundits questioned even then the tough talk going into an election year.
Yeah.
And especially the threat of executive action for everything.
For everything. And again, I mean, some of it may be wise, and presidents have done that before, but under these conditions, it may very well cost the Democrats the control of the U.S. Senate.
But he's clearly blowing it off until after the election.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, our own legislators here in Michigan went back today and said, as much as, held up signs going in, we're back to work, but we're not doing anything
that's right.
until
Well,
after November.
Until lame duck.
And are we going to see another flurry in lame duck like we did 2 years ago?
I wonder. I tell you, there's a couple of things I'm worried about, but one thing that has not
Roads is the biggie.
Roads is a big one, and here's another one to watch. In terms of the Electoral College, every state can decide how they allocate those votes. Most states, with two exceptions, do it on a winner-take-all basis. You get the most public votes, you get all the electoral votes. But states could, if they wanted to, give those out on a district basis, where if you win district number 1, you get 1 electoral vote. District number 5, you get electoral vote there. There's a plot, if you want to call it that, among Republicans to make Michigan a district-based electoral college system. If that had happened, Mitt Romney would have taken a significant fraction of Michigan's votes and would have won the presidency in 2012. So
on Michigan alone?
No, if you had done that in all the states.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Yeah. But if that were in place, even though he lost the public vote by a pretty hefty margin, he would have won the Electoral College. And in fact, he would have won Michigan as well, because he took more districts. Even though Obama had more votes, Romney would have won more of our congressional districts. So again, it's not been talked about much, but I'm kind of going back to the right to work stuff, where I wonder if that might pop up in the lame duck session and be pulled out of the hat at the last minute. It could cause an awful lot of backlash if it does.
Well, I wonder, one of the things that they put off, and this is something we talked about last week, is roads.
Roads, yeah. Clearly, I mean, the pressure is there from so many people. I mean, of both parties, they're angry about the roads. They're getting worse all the time. And the bottom line is, if you're going to fix the roads, you're going to have to raise revenue somewhere. And nobody likes to raise taxes, but they're probably going to wait till lame duck for that kind of thing.
Now, Brian Dickerson in the Free Press this weekend had a piece. He was taking the Tea Party to task. He said how the Tea Party is muddying Michigan's road debate. And here's just an excerpt from it. When the legislature's amateur highway engineers charge that Michigan is getting far less for its road dollars than any other states, they're making an argument the evidence simply doesn't support. And when they blithely insist Michigan is already spending more than enough to keep its highways safe and sound, they're taking you for a ride, one that's likely to get bumpier with each passing month of legislative inaction. Is how much, I mean, is the legislature and the governor, for that matter, are they sticking their heads under the bed, until after the election?
Oh, I think so. And unfortunately, I think it's become the habit the last couple of years. And it's not just right to work, but there's been a number of major issues.
And is the Tea Party, in essence, blocking the Republicans from putting together a plan that they could pass in lame duck, for example?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the Tea Party they haven't quite taken over the Republican Party, but it's interesting to watch how in a sense how frightened they were over the Kelly issue for the Republican convention a couple of weeks ago, where I mean clearly Kelly did not lose; he won fairly handily, but the Republicans were very afraid of the possibility of the Tea Party, kicking Kelly out and putting their own person in as lieutenant governor. And I think for an awful lot of Republican office holders, even if they don't share the Tea Party ideas, they're afraid of the noise the Tea Party can make if they vote wrong, particularly on a tax bill. I think they've really got they got the party in a sense on the run. They've really got to pay attention to him. So, yeah, the bottom line is I think they would rather wait till after the election to deal with that stuff, if they deal with it at all, and we'll see what happens then.
Well, as we get into the last few minutes here, I want to remind people that I'm Tom Sumner. This is Flint's premier political pundit, Paul Rosicki, with me, and we're doing these chats weekly on Tuesday afternoons from 3 to 5 p.m. on flinttalkradio.com. You can stream us live or go see it afterwards, but in order to participate in the conversation, you have to call in. You have to watch us live, and you have to call in during the show. We always have the number up on the screen. We'd look forward to hearing from you and sharing your thoughts and seeing what you think about some of the things that we've brought up and talked about last week and this week. And of course, we're looking for sponsors as well. If you'd like to see us continue to do these weekly chats, please get in touch with us. Did you have, was there anything else that hit your radar over the last week?
I was I should mention that in the few minutes we have left. Here's an article, today's Free Press, 5 things that are on and off Michigan's lawmakers' to-do list. $1 billion tax settlement, tax decision case with IBM Michigan, well, I'll skip that one. Medical marijuana, whether or not they had to clarify that over the next couple of weeks as well. The Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, will they include gays under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act? And again, there too, you're finding some bipartisan support for that, even among some Republicans, and not a majority probably, but a good number of them. And road improvements, again, whether we see that in the next couple of weeks or in lame duck, clearly we're going to have to raise between $1 and $2 billion for the next 10 years to take care of the roads. By almost everybody's estimate, it's going to be expensive, but and maybe painful for politicians, but we're going to have to do that in some way.
I still don't understand why people don't just run over to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy some hot mix. Somebody just, I was talking to somebody, or maybe it was you last week, that told me about somebody that all of the neighbors got together, chipped in, and had their street resurfaced.
Our friend's house, we go there regularly, and there was this a little small suburban subdivision street in the Grand Blanc area, but it was just horrible. I mean, literally, I call it a tank trap because we had to slow down to 5 miles an hour and bump through the thing. But somebody, and as far as I know, it was the neighbors. I'm guessing it looked like they just got some road patch and filled in the worst of it. It's still fairly bumpy, but at least you can drive down it at a somewhat more reasonable speed. I don't know how much you could do that in the middle of
Well, there was a piece on one of the
that.
local television stations just recently, after they get through the first 10 or 15 minutes of homicides and arson fires.
Right.
They always like to drop in a positive piece.
Somebody
and there
making
was
a
somebody
difference.
in the neighborhood that was,
Cutting grass.
no, he was remounting people's mailboxes.
Oh, I hadn't seen that story.
The city had come through and made everybody pull their mailboxes because they were laying new sewer.
Oh, yeah.
In the areas right in front of the homes. And so this guy, at his own expense, went out and got lumber and went up and down his block, remounting all of the mailboxes.
Those can make a difference.
Now, apparently he's going to be reimbursed, by the government agency that did the work and so on, which is nice. I don't know if they'll pay him for his time and, but for the materials and stuff, because they had him taken down. It was their responsibility to put him back up. But this guy got right on it and got it done.
Good for him. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why don't we just do that stuff instead of waiting around, for now in this particular case, the government came in and tore them down. I don't think the government goes out at night and digs potholes to make work for themselves. But, it's the idea that we don't just do it, just get it done. That seems foreign to me, the idea that somehow that might be illegal.
Well, I think I told you last time that a friend of mine who has got a pretty good size, commercial size lawnmower, was cutting a city park regularly, and he got a cease and desist order from the city telling him to stop doing it. And this park was not getting cut very much, and he would go in there every now and then, mostly at his own expense in terms of fuel and everything else, and cut the park. But after a couple of months, he got this letter from somebody downtown saying, "Stop doing it." Yeah, unfortunately.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's just ridiculous. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the people downtown. I mean, this, maybe I'm thinking too Mayberry or something, but
Yeah, I don't know.
this idea that somehow government is the only one who can do it, even though it's not getting done, just seems not to be working.
Yeah. No, I know in my neighborhood, there's a few empty lots and such, and some of those traffic triangles that are normally cut by the city, and the neighbors are cutting some of those things, at least periodically. They'll go out there with their own lawnmowers and clean up the empty lots a bit, and they say there's a kind of an empty triangle of grass between some streets there. They'll cut that stuff down as necessary as well. Yeah.
In what reality do citizens chip in and do
Yeah.
good deeds covertly for fear that the government
Good
will
question.
slap them
Yeah,
down?
that is strange. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
To me, it just seems like, run down to Home
Now-
Depot or Lowe's. Maybe Lowe's would be a better choice.
Don't
since-
use your credit card.
yeah, at least don't use your credit card for now at,
That's
at
right.
Home Depot.
Yeah.
But seriously, more importantly, go to the local hardware store if you
Yeah.
can find one, and buy some ready mix and go out and fix a home.
No, I can see that working for, I say, in this example, it was in front of their home. It's their own neighborhood street. I don't know if anybody's going to go down Center Road or an expressway or a major highway, M15 or anything else like that, and tackle that kind of project. That could take an awful lot of blacktop. So I mean, I can see it in some very neighborhood.
But the idea is
Yeah.
you get a bunch of people who are doing this.
Well,
A lot
yeah.
of things get filled, and maybe that eases things
That
up.
does, yeah.
To get the major thoroughfares done
And we
more
do,
quickly.
as I think about it, we do that stuff with these, various neighborhood cleanups, and occasionally groups will go out there and clean up a park. And,
But now they're starting to have to file all kinds of forms
Yeah.
and
As a matter-
paperwork to
as
get
a-
permission to do it, and that just seems silly to me.
Yeah, in fact, my wife used to take care of a little garden up along Court Street for a while, and somebody told her that she had to file a 5-year plan about how she was going to do that. She would just go out there whenever she felt like it and pull some weeds, plant a few flowers, and that kind of stuff occasionally. But now she needs a 5-year plan if she wants to keep doing that kind of stuff.
Well, that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Paul, it's always it's always great to
Always fun.
visit
Always
with
good.
you and to have these chats. And if you out there that are watching would like to see us continue these weekly chats, by all means, get in touch with John Wilson or Steve Myers here at flinttalkradio.com. We're anxious to have people sponsor these weekly conversations, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can send us an email, or more importantly, listen to us when we're streaming live, and you can call in and take part in the conversation. In the meantime, I guess we'll go to our theme music to wrap things up, but we'll be back here next Tuesday from 3 to 5 p.m. on flinttalkradio.com. And this will be posted up online in just a little bit, I would imagine, and feel free to share it with your friends and let people know that we're here each and every Tuesday at flinttalkradio.com. The Tom Sumner Program. I'm Tom Sumner, Flint's premier political pundit, Paul Rosicki, and we'll see you next week.